the link, you are going to be brought to this sample responses from the AP U.S. Government and Politics Practice Exam. This was the first thing they gave us as teachers as examples for the new FRQs, because remember this course got redesigned back in late 2018. We'll take a look at these, the concept application question. That's the first one. If you notice, if you come down here, it's going to have the rubric. It is all of 3 points. Describe a political institution, behavior, or process connected with scenario. Explain how the response in Part A affects or is affected by a political process. And then the last one says explain how the scenario relates to a political institution, behavior, or process in the course. All right, let's take a look at this one. So if you notice, this is all of 3 points. I believe with the way the argument essay has been altered, that is all of 5 points. So this whole AP Gov exam you're going to take is all of 8 points. There's very little room for error on that. Okay, so I mean, the good news is you're able to narrow down your preparation on this thing to 2 FRQs. But the what's difficult about it, what's challenging about it, is the fact that you're talking all of 8 points. So I think maybe a 6, 7, 8 maybe a 7 and 8 is probably the 5 range. A 6, you're in 4 range. 5, 4, you're probably in 3 range. Anything less, you're in the 1 or 2 range. So point being is, the difference between getting the point right for one response and not, is going to be the difference between a 4 and a 3. And for you guys, a lot of you guys, you need that 4. Between now and May 11th, right, we're about a month out. We're going to spend a lot of time looking at these. Okay, so let's look at this scenario. It says consumers complained after EpiPen maker Mylan hiked the price of the emergency auto injector by $100 in recent months for no obvious reason. The price has increased 450% since 2004, when a dose cost $100 in today's dollars to its current price of more than $600. The medication itself isn't expensive. Analysts calculate that the dosage contained in a single pen is worth about $1. After reading the scenario, respond to A, B, and C below. Describe a power Congress could use to address the comments outlined in the scenario. Let's talk about what a bad response to that would be. A bad response would be Congress can use the Interstate Commerce Clause, and then you end right there. Now, that is correct. Congress can use the Interstate Commerce Clause, but they're saying to address the comments outlined in the scenario. Where some of you guys are going to mess up, or where you have messed up in the past, is you not bringing the scenario, what's happening up here, into your response. So you would say, Congress can use the power of the Interstate Commerce Clause to pass a law that sets the EpiPen prices at a cheaper price. There you go. Now you've addressed the comments outlined in the scenario. In the context of the scenario, explain how the use of congressional power described in Part A can be affected by its interaction with the presidency. This is their failed way of seeing, do you understand your checks and balances? I bet you see checks and balances in the concept application, or maybe even the argumentation essay. All right. The reason being is I just consider it the number one concept in AP Gov. So in the context scenario, explain how the use of congressional power described in Part A can be affected by interaction with the presidency. Okay. Well, what you just said in A, which is that Congress can use the power of regulating interstate commerce to pass a law to limit the price of EpiPens. Now you need to bring the presidency into that. You could say the president could then veto this law because they are very much pro-business or something along those lines. All right. Part C says, in the context of the scenario, explain how the interaction between Congress and the president can be affected by linkage institutions. This is not fair game. Linkage institutions, this is going to be Unit 4 and 5 stuff. Linkage institutions are anything that link us to government. So interest groups, political parties, the media, they all link us to government. This would not be considered fair game. However, you're going to see a Part C. All right. So what that's going to look like is usually something like how can citizens of the country try and push back on this themselves. Well, they could elect members of Congress that are more would be more willing to support that law that you mentioned in Part A. Again, this is really where it gets a little freestyle because they can be kind of all over the place on this one. However, linkage institutions, what they're mentioning right now, that's just not going to be fair game for what you guys see on May 11th. And then, here you go. Here's how they're saying, how this thing is scored. Okay, if you scroll down to the argumentation essay, this is a pretty tough one. When first time I saw this one, I thought it was pretty kind of intimidating because it requires a lot of knowledge. All right, so let's take a look at this. This is develop an argument that explains which of the three models of representative democracy, participatory, pluralist, or elite, best achieve the founders' intent for American democracy in terms of ensuring a stable government run by the people. So in other words, did the framers of the Constitution, did they want participatory democracy? Did they want pluralist democracy? Did they want elite democracy? Well, we see all of these in the Constitution. Participatory democracy means broad participation by the citizenry. So where do we see broad participation by the citizenry in the Constitution? The fact that we elected the House of Representatives from the outset, that could be considered participatory democracy. Pluralist democracy, right? Where do we see this? Well, we see that a lot in Federalist number 10, where Madison's saying let groups compete because it's going to allow for a healthy, balanced democracy. And then last, elite democracy, right? This idea of a democracy run by the few or the elite, mainly this time the rich. Now, when you're writing this, what's the easiest place to go on this? What's going to be the easiest place? What did the framers really intend? Well, you got to think day one, right? We're not electing a whole lot. There's not a whole lot of democracy in the United States from day one. House of Representatives, yes. Senate, no. President, you got the Electoral College. The judiciary, you've got the fact that they're chosen by the president, confirmed by the Senate. Therefore, completely removed from the people. So probably the easiest way to argue this one would be to say that they were really trying to set up an elite democracy. All right. Now we see all three of these and how it plays out, but I think this would be the easiest way to go. All right. You can talk about the U.S. Constitution as evidence, right? You could say that the fact that the Senate was chosen by the state legislatures and not the people, that suggests elite, that suggests a government run by the few and not participatory, not broad public participation. Also in the U.S. Constitution, you could go with the Electoral College. Again, elite. They didn't trust the people necessarily to choose the chief executive. They're allowing these elite, these electors to make that decision. Now, what you cannot do is you can't double dip. You can't use the U.S. Constitution for your first piece of evidence and your second. You're not going to be able to do that. So let's say you've chosen elite democracy, you chose to go with the senators, or you chose to go with the Electoral College to show that the U.S. Constitution shows evidence for elite democracy. Well, what's your second piece of evidence there? That's where I would go with Federalist 78. And I'd be like, look, Hamilton is arguing in 78 that we need a judiciary chosen by the president, confirmed by the Senate, that is completely insulated from public opinion, completely insulated from the people. That kills this idea of participatory democracy. It suggests this idea of elite democracy. All right, and then from there you're good because you don't have to do the alternative perspective with the refutation, concession, or rebuttal. All right. I realize you guys haven't seen these concepts in a while. Participatory, pluralist, or elite. This be great to go review in that book you got, that Princeton review book. Think about how I went over this. Think about how you would write that thesis. If you were going to use Electoral College or the fact that the Senate was chosen by the state legislatures, and then you're going to use Federal 78, how would you write that thesis? Okay. All right, that's going to be it for the review today when it comes to the FRQs.